My brother made a genius investment with our car money. Now, we're both broke, and he still thinks he'll be rich, even after losing everything to a scam. So, picture this. I'm sitting here, 27 years old, staring at an empty spot in the driveway where my car used to be, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around how my life turned into this absolute dumpster fire. It all started a couple of years ago when my brother, Jake, and I decided to pool our savings to buy a used Volkswagen Golf. It wasn't anything fancy, just a reliable little 2015 model with a decent engine, some dings on the hood, and a faint smell of old coffee stains in the upholstery. But to us, it was freedom. We'd both been scraping by, me working overtime at a warehouse job and him bouncing between gigs, and neither of us could afford a car on our own. Together, though, we made it work. The deal was simple. I'd been saving up from my paychecks for ages, and Jake had some cash stashed from a side hustle he wouldn't shut up about. We threw it all together, $8,000 total, and bought the Golf from this sketchy dude on Craigslist who swore it was a steal. Looking back, maybe that should have been a red flag, but at the time, we were too excited to care. We shook hands right there in the parking lot, split the title 50-50, and laid out the rules. I'd handle repairs since I'm decent with a wrench, and Jake would cover gas since he's always claiming he's got cash flow. We'd share it equally, taking turns week by week. It was our little pact, our way of clawing out of the broke life rut we'd been stuck in since Mom had to downsize after Dad left. For a while, it was perfect. I'd drive to work, tweaking the brakes or changing the oil when it needed it, feeling like I finally had some control over my life. Jake would take it on weekends, cruising around like he owned the world, blasting his awful playlists through the rattling speakers. We'd bicker sometimes, him whining about a scratch I didn't fix fast enough, me griping when he left empty Monster cans in the back seat. But it worked. That Golf was more than a car. It was our ticket to not feeling like total losers anymore. Little did I know, my brother was about to take that ticket, shred it, and light the pieces on fire with a blowtorch made of pure, delusional stupidity. Because one day, I went to grab the keys for my turn, and the car was just gone. I still remember the exact moment my stomach dropped. It was a Tuesday morning, my turn to take the Golf, and I dragged myself out of bed at 6 a.m., already dreading the warehouse shift ahead. I shuffled out to the driveway where we kept the car parked. Mom's old place doesn't have a garage, just this cracked slab of concrete. And it wasn't there. Just an empty space staring back at me, mocking me with a stray oil stain where the Golf used to sit. My first thought was theft. Some jerk must have hotwired it in the night, right? I started pacing, heart pounding, checking the street like maybe I'd parked it somewhere else and forgot. But no, it was gone. Vanished. And that's when the panic really kicked in. I grabbed my phone and called Jake. No answer. Straight to voicemail, his smug little, "Yo, it's Jake. Leave a message," greeting making me want to chuck the phone at the wall. I texted him, "Where's the car? Call me now." Nothing. Radio silence. I kept calling, kept texting, each unanswered ping twisting the knot in my gut tighter. Was he hurt? Did something happen? For 2 days, 2 whole days, I was stuck in this limbo, imagining the worst. Work was a nightmare without the car. I had to beg a ride from a coworker who wouldn't stop asking why I looked like I'd been hit by a truck. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, just kept refreshing my phone, waiting for Jake to explain. Then, Thursday night, it finally came. A text. One stupid, casual message lighting up my screen like a grenade going off. "Hey, relax. I invested our money in a promising crypto project. Soon, we'll be rich." That's it. No apology, no heads up, just this breezy little bombshell like he hadn't just yanked the rug out from under me. My hands were shaking as I reread it, trying to process what our money even meant. The car? Our car? The one we'd scraped every penny to buy together? I sat there on my lumpy couch, staring at those words, feeling this hot, prickly rage creeping up my neck. He'd taken our shared lifeline, our equal stake, and thrown it into some digital casino without even asking. And that "we'll be rich" part? It wasn't hope, it was a taunt. Like he'd already decided I'd thank him later. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just sat there, numb, knowing this was only the start of the nightmare. By the time I finally tracked Jake down, I was a mess of nerves and fury, ready to claw some answers out of him. It was Friday afternoon, 3 days after his bombshell text, and he'd agreed to meet me at Mom's place. Neutral ground, I guess. I got there first, pacing the tiny living room, the empty driveway outside taunting me every time I glanced out the window. When he strolled in, he had this swagger, like he'd just won the lottery instead of torched our lives. No shame, no hesitation, just a laptop tucked under his arm, and this infuriating grin plastered across his face. I didn't even get a chance to unload before he plopped down on the couch, flipped open the screen, and started talking like I was some clueless kid he needed to school. He pulled up these charts, bright, jagged lines spiking upward on some crypto site I'd never heard of. "Look at this, man," he kept saying, pointing at the screen like it was proof of his genius. The coin was called something dumb, like MoonShiBX or whatever, and he swore it was the next big thing. He rambled on about how it had already doubled in value since he'd jumped in, how we were looking at a 1,000% profit in a month, maybe less. His eyes were wild, practically glowing with this manic energy, and he kept throwing out buzzwords, blockchain, DeFi, Lumbos, like he'd been possessed by some YouTube hustle guru. I stood there, arms crossed, feeling my pulse hammer in my temples, waiting for him to get to the part where he explained why I wasn't consulted about our car. When I finally cut in, asking how he could legally sell something we owned together without my signature, he didn't even flinch, just leaned back, shrugged, and hit me with this gut punch of a line. "What accounts are there between yours?" Like that was supposed to make it okay. Like because we're brothers, he could just steamroll me. No discussion needed. I pressed harder. How'd he even pull it off? He waved it off, muttering something about a buddy who handled the sale, but wouldn't meet my eyes. His whole vibe was this cocky mix of dismissal and hype, like I was the idiot for not seeing the vision. I wanted to grab him by the shirt and shake him until that smirk fell off, but I just stood there, seething, as he kept scrolling through his stupid charts. That's when I realized this wasn't just about the car anymore. He was in deep, and I was already collateral damage. After that meeting with Jake, I couldn't just sit there stewing in his delusional hype. I needed facts, something solid to grab onto while his promises of crypto riches echoed in my head like a bad joke. So I started digging. Late that night, after he'd left Mom's with his laptop and that smug strut, I fired up my ancient desktop and hit the internet. My hands were still shaky from the confrontation, but I was determined to figure out what he'd done with our golf. I wasn't expecting a neon sign spelling it out, but what I found hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. There it was, buried in a local Facebook Marketplace archive, an ad for our car, posted by some guy I didn't know, timestamped a week ago. The listing was a slap in the face. 2015 Volkswagen Golf, good condition, $6,000 OBO, urgent sale, need cash fast for an investment. $6,000. $6,000. We bought that car for $8,000, and yeah, it wasn't perfect, but it was worth at least that on a bad day. Kelley Blue Book pegged it around $8,500 with the mileage we had. Jake, or his shady buddy, had dumped it for $2,000 below market, just to get quick cash. The ad even had a blurry pic of the Golf, that familiar dent on the hood staring back at me like a ghost. I sat there, jaw clenched, scrolling through the post's comments. Some dude asking why the rush, another offering $5,800, and the seller snapping back. No time to haggle. Take it or leave it. Sold. Done. Our car, our shared lifeline, pawned off like a cheap watch because Jake urgently needed money for an investment. I felt sick. That $2,000 gap wasn't just a discount. It was my half of the car, my savings, my late nights at the warehouse, flushed down the drain for his crypto gamble. I kept refreshing the page, hoping I'd misread it, but the truth kept sinking in deeper, sharper. He hadn't just sold it without me. He'd sold it cheap, desperate, like some junkie unloading stolen goods. All that crap about 1,000% profits felt hollow now. I could see the panic behind it, the rush to flip our asset into his dream. I wanted to call him right then, scream about how he'd screwed us both, but I just sat there, staring at the screen, the weight of it crushing me. How do you even fight back against someone who's already burned the bridge and danced on the ashes? I didn't sleep that night, just kept picturing that ad, that dented hood, and the hole in my life where the Golf used to be. A week after I found that cursed Marketplace ad, things got worse, way worse. I'd started checking that MoonShiBX coin myself, not because I bought Jake's hype, but because I needed to know how deep this hole was getting. I'd bookmarked some crypto tracker site, refreshing it like a lunatic, watching those little green lines he'd bragged about turn into a blood-red nosedive. By the end of the week, it hit a 60% drop. 60%. In 7 days, that promising project he'd sunk our car money into had tanked harder than a lead balloon, wiping out more than half its value. I did the math in my head, $6,000 from the Golf sale, now worth maybe $2,400 if he cashed out right then. My half. Barely $1,200 left of the $4,000 I poured in. I felt this hollow ache in my chest, like someone had scooped out my insides and replaced them with ash. I called Jake that night, hands trembling as I gripped the phone, ready to hear him grovel or at least admit he'd messed up. But when he picked up, he sounded fine. Not shaken, not sorry, just this breezy, upbeat tone that made my skin crawl. He didn't even let me finish explaining the drop before cutting in, all casual, like we were chatting about the weather. It's temporary, man, chill. These dips happen all the time in crypto. Means it's a buying opportunity. A buying opportunity? I stood there, dumbfounded, as he kept going, saying the market would bounce back, that we just needed to invest more to recoup the drop. Invest more? With what? The car was gone, my savings were gone, and he was acting like I had a secret stash to throw into his sinking ship. I tried reasoning with him, pointed out the 60% loss, the shady sale, how we were already in the red, but he just doubled down. His voice had this edge, this feverish confidence, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. He started spouting jargon again, support levels, hodling, some nonsense about diamond hands, and I could practically hear the YouTube videos he'd been mainlining. It wasn't panic, it was worse. He was blind to it, hooked on the dream, and every word he said pushed me closer to losing it. I hung up, head pounding, staring at that tracker site as the numbers kept slipping. This wasn't just a bad call anymore. It was a delusion, and he was dragging me down with it. I couldn't tell if I wanted to save him or strangle him, but one thing was clear. He wasn't stopping, and I was running out of ways to keep up. I thought I'd hit rock bottom with the car and the crypto crash, but life had one more gut punch waiting. It was a random Tuesday, about 10 days after that 60% drop, and I was still reeling, trying to figure out how to claw back from Jake's mess. Then Mom called, her voice shaky in a way I hadn't heard since Dad walked out. She'd gotten a letter from the bank, some notice about a second lien on her apartment. She didn't understand it, kept rambling about how she'd never signed anything, how it must be a mistake. My stomach twisted into knots as I listened, a cold dread creeping up my spine. I told her to scan it and send it over, promising I'd sort it out. When that PDF hit my inbox, I opened it and saw the truth staring back in black and white. A $15,000 loan, secured by her place, with Jake's name scrawled on the dotted line. I sat there, frozen, the screen blurring as my brain caught up. He'd forged her signature, had to have, because Mom wouldn't have agreed to this. The loan was dated a week ago, right after the crypto tanked, and the purpose line just said, personal investment. Personal investment. He'd taken her home, the one thing she'd clung to through years of scraping by, and betted on his by the dip fever dream. 15 grand, more than double what he'd gotten for the golf, poured into a coin that was now worth pennies on the dollar. I felt this white-hot rage boiling up, mixed with a sick, helpless panic. This wasn't just my money anymore. He dragged Mom into his quicksand, and she didn't even know. I couldn't wait. I texted Jake, family meeting, Mom's place, tonight. No excuses. Then I called our older sister, Lisa, who's always been the no-nonsense one, and told her everything. The car, the crypto, the loan. She was livid, swearing under her breath as I laid it out, and promised she'd be there. By 7 p.m., we were all crammed in Mom's tiny kitchen, me pacing, Lisa glaring, Mom clutching a mug of tea like it was a lifeline. Jake showed up late, strolling in with that same cocky vibe, like he could charm his way out. I didn't give him the chance to start. I slapped the loan papers on the table, watching his face go pale for the first time. Mom's eyes widened, Lisa's narrowed, and the room went dead silent. I'd organized this showdown to confront him, to force some accountability, but staring at him then, I realized I had no idea how to fix this, or if it even could be fixed. The air in Mom's kitchen was thick enough to choke on as we stared Jake down. The loan papers sat there on the table, a ticking bomb, and for once, he didn't have that smug grin. Lisa started first, her voice sharp as she demanded to know how he'd dared to touch Mom's apartment. Mom just kept staring at him, eyes wet, asking why he'd do this to her. I stood there, fists clenched, waiting for him to squirm out of it like always. But the pressure, 3 of us boring holes into him, finally broke something. He slumped in the chair, ran a hand through his hair, and let out the shaky laugh that made my skin crawl. Then it all came spilling out, a confession so ugly I could barely process it. He'd been investing for 6 months. 6 months. Not just the car, not just the loan. This crypto mess was only the latest in a string of dubious schemes he'd been chasing. Penny stocks, some sketchy Forex app, a guaranteed trading bot he'd found on Telegram, all of it sold to him by random dudes online promising quick millions. He admitted he'd sunk every penny he had into them, racking up debts he couldn't even tally on the spot. Credit cards maxed out, personal loans from shady lenders, even money borrowed from some coworker he barely knew. Selling the golf? That wasn't some brilliant pivot to crypto riches, it was a desperate grab to get even. to plug the holes from his earlier flops. He convinced himself this Moon Shiba X thing was his big break, the one that had wiped the slate clean. I felt my knees buckle as he kept talking, his voice cracking now, like he was unloading a weight he'd carried too long. He'd lost over $25,000 total, more than I'd ever saved in my life, before the car even entered the picture. The $6,000 he got for it was already gone, shoveled into the crypto pit, and the $15,000 loan? Same deal, blown on doubling down after the 60% drop. Mom started crying softly, Lisa cursed under her breath, and I just stood there, numb. This wasn't a one-off mistake. He'd been drowning for months, lying to us all, and instead of asking for help, he'd gambled our car, Mom's home, everything, on a fantasy. He looked up at us, eyes pleading now, saying he'd fix it, that the market would turn. But it was too late. The brother I'd trusted wasn't just reckless, he was a stranger, and he'd dragged us into his wreckage. I didn't know whether to hug him or hate him, but one thing hit hard. We were all sinking now, and he still didn't see the water. The days after Jake's confession were a blur of dread and disbelief, but I couldn't stop checking that crypto tracker, hoping for a miracle. Instead, I got a nightmare. About a week later, I stumbled across a Reddit thread, some crypto sub where people were freaking out about Moon Shiba X. Words like rug pull and exit scam kept popping up, and my heart sank as I dug deeper. Turns out, the coin wasn't just crashing, it was a fraud. The developers had vanished, wallets drained, the whole thing a sham designed to suck in suckers like Jake. By the time the post hit X and the sites updated, its value was zero. Zilch. The $6,000 from our golf, the $15,000 loan against Mom's place, all of it, completely gone. Not a penny left to scrape back. I sat there, staring at the flatline chart, feeling this hollow rage clawing at my chest. Our money hadn't just tanked, it had been stolen, and Jake had handed it over like a gift. I confronted him that night, storming over to his dingy apartment, the loan papers and screenshots shoved in my pocket. He opened the door looking wrecked, bags under his eyes, hair a mess, but when I told him about the scam, he didn't even blink. Just leaned against the wall, shrugged, and said, "It's fine, man. We just gotta wait a year or two, the market always recovers." Wait a year or two. I stood there, jaw tight, as he rambled on about cycles, how real investors ride out the dips, how we'd laugh about this later. Laugh? I wanted to shake him until he snapped out of it. There was no recovery. This wasn't a legit coin hitting a rough patch. It was a con, and he'd funneled our lives into it. The car, Mom's security, my savings, $21,000 total, plus his mystery debts, wiped out, and he was still dreaming of a rebound that had never come. I paced his cramped living room, the weight of it crushing me. Mom was already getting calls from the bank about missed payments on that loan. Her apartment, her last lifeline, now at risk because of him. Lisa wouldn't even speak to him, and I was stuck between wanting to fix this and wanting to walk away. But Jake? He just sat there, scrolling his phone, muttering about holding the line. It hit me then, he wasn't sorry, wasn't scared. He was delusional, clinging to a fantasy while the consequences piled up around us. I left without another word, the door slamming behind me, knowing we'd lost more than money. We'd lost him, and I had no clue how to dig us out of this grave he'd dug. After the scam came to light, I spent days wrestling with what to do. Mom's apartment was on the chopping block, bank notices piling up, her voice trembling every time we talked. Lisa kept pushing me to handle it, like I had some magic fix for Jake's chaos. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. He'd sold our car, our joint property, without a scrap of consent, forged Mom's signature for that loan, and now sat there preaching patience while we drowned. I couldn't just wait for him to wake up. I had to act. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I drove to the police station, hands sweaty on the steering wheel of a co-worker's borrowed clunker, and filed a report. Sat there for an hour, laying out the illegal sale of the golf, showing the title with my name on it, the marketplace ad, everything. The officer nodded, took my statement, and said they'd look into it. Walking out, I felt this weird mix of relief and nausea, like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Jake found out fast. I'd barely gotten home when my phone lit up with his number. He was frantic, voice cracking as he unloaded on me. He couldn't believe I'd gone to the cops, kept saying, "How can you do this, man? We're family," over and over, like it was a shield I wasn't supposed to pierce. He sounded shocked, betrayed, even, and it hit me hard, guilt twisting in my gut as his words echoed. Family. The same family he'd lied to, stolen from, left to clean up his mess. I stood there in my cramped apartment, gripping the phone, torn between hanging up and screaming. He rambled on, saying I was overreacting, that the car was our investment anyway, that the police wouldn't care. But I couldn't let it slide, not this time. That $6,000 sale was the one piece I could prove, the one thread I could pull to maybe get something back, or at least make him face reality. I didn't yell back, just told him it was done, that he'd left me no choice, and hung up. The silence after was deafening. I kept replaying his voice, hurt, accusing, and wondered if I'd gone too far. But then I thought of Mom, of the golf's empty spot, of the scam that ate our future, and the guilt hardened into something else. Resolve. He'd shocked me plenty. Now it was his turn. The police might not fix it all. Hell, they might not even charge him. But I wasn't letting him off free. Not anymore. I sank onto my couch, head in my hands, knowing this wasn't just about the car now. It was about trust and whether we'd ever get it back. Months after I filed that police report, the mess finally landed in court. It wasn't some big dramatic trial, just a small claims hearing, me in a stiff collared shirt I hadn't worn since a job interview. Jake slouched across the room, avoiding my eyes. I'd brought everything. The golf's title, the marketplace ad, bank records showing our pooled savings. The judge didn't waste time. Ruled the sale was illegal, no consent, no excuse. Jake had to pay me back my share for $1,000, plus court fees. It was a win, technically, but standing there as the gavel dropped, I didn't feel victorious. Just tired. The money was a lifeline, sure. I could maybe get a beater car, stop bumming rides, but it didn't touch the loan on Mom's place or the scam's fallout. Still, it was something, a hard line drawn after months of chaos. Jake didn't fight it, not really. He just sat there, head down, as the ruling sank in. Later, I heard through Lisa he'd picked up a second job, night shifts at a gas station on top of his sporadic gig work. No more crypto hype. No more waiting for the market. He was scrambling now, juggling rent and repayments, texting me once about a payment plan like it was a business deal. I'd see the deposits trickle in, $200 here, $300 there, and feel this strange pang. He was trying, finally, but it was too late to fix us. We hadn't spoken, not really, since the hearing. No apologies, no late-night rants, just silence. Our relationship was a charred husk, burned out by his schemes and my refusal to keep bailing him out. Mom tried bridging it, inviting us both to dinner, but I couldn't sit across from him without seeing that smug grin from months ago, promising riches while he pawned our lives. I think he's starting to get it, though, the real cost. Lisa says he's quieter now, no more bragging about investments. The second job's humbling him, maybe, or at least keeping him too busy to chase the next scam. Me? I'm still picking up the pieces, working extra shifts to help Mom with the bank, staring at that empty driveway. The $4,000 won't undo the damage, but it's a start. Our bond's gone, probably for good, and that stings more than I expected. I used to think family could weather anything, but Jake taught me there's a limit. He's paying me back in dollars now, slow and steady, but the trust? That's a debt he'll never settle. I lock my door at night, wondering if he'll ever see it too. The price wasn't just money, it was us.